There's something about being a girl with a boyfriend that the world romanticizes, like you've made it, like you're no longer waiting, like your worth has finally been stamped with approval. But let me tell you something, having someone doesn't mean you've found yourself. Sometimes it means you've wandered further away than you realize. She used to know her name. She used to look in the mirror and recognize the fire in her eyes, the vision in her bones, the strength in her steps. But now she's second, guesses her worth when she doesn't get a text back. She questions her beauty when the compliments stop. She's muted her voice just to avoid conflict, and suddenly that powerful girl has shrunk herself into the shadows of trying to make it work. She traded identity for attachment, and now she doesn't even remember who she was before she became this version of herself. You see, there comes a moment when your spirit starts packing boxes even if your heart hasn't caught up. That's your soul saying, we can't stay here. That's your future knocking on your present saying, this ain't it. You begin to realize that being chosen means nothing if you weren't celebrated, respected, and protected in the choosing. There's a difference between someone staying with you and someone seeing you, and God never asked you to shrink to fit someone else's vision of love. We live in a world where attention feels like validation. Where being wanted is confused with being valued, but let me remind you, just because someone gives you access doesn't mean they're giving you honor. Just because they call doesn't mean they care. You are not a filler. You are not a convenience. You are not an option. You are a daughter of the Most High God, and when you start acting like it, everything around you has to shift. Sis, when did you stop dreaming? When did your voice go soft? When did your sparkle dim? God didn't give you a light just to hide it under someone's ego. He gave you fire to set purpose ablaze, but you keep trying to warm people who refuse to light up your life. That's not love. That's a leech on your destiny, and you've been too afraid to call it what it is, because calling it out means you'll have to step into the unknown. But baby girl, the unknown is where God does his best work. There's a version of you that's waiting to be reintroduced, a version that remembers how to laugh without permission, that dances without judgment, that walks with confidence because she knows God walks with her. That version of you hasn't left, she's just been silenced, and it's time to call her back. It's time to get honest about the tears that fall when no one's watching, about the nights you stay up wondering if you're enough, about the way you've begged God for signs but ignored the silence that was the sign. It's time to be real with yourself. You've been loving hard but not wisely. You've been praying for healing but staying in harm's way. And now God is saying, daughter, I can't heal what you keep hiding. This is your invitation to reclaim you. Not the version that was built in someone else's expectations, but the one heaven designed from the beginning. You're not just a girl with a boyfriend, you're a woman with a calling, a woman with oil, a woman with vision, and no relationship, no matter how romantic, should ever cause you to forget that she used to know who she was. Before she ever gave her heart away, she walked in rooms with a kind of confidence that didn't need an audience. Her smile was genuine, her steps were steady, and her spirit was full. She was in tune with herself, anchored in the quiet assurance that her worth wasn't something she had to prove, it was something she carried. But somewhere along the line, things shifted. It didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, like water eroding stone. Little compromises, little silences, little sacrifices that seemed small at first, but began to echo in her soul louder than she expected. She stopped laughing as freely. She started second, guessing what she once knew without a doubt. She began adjusting herself, her tone, her truth, her dreams, just to fit in someone else's frame. It felt like connection at first. It felt like attention, like finally being seen, finally being wanted. And for a while, that filled the empty places. The compliments felt like air after holding her breath for too long. The affection felt like a rescue, but there was something deeper inside her that wasn't convinced. Something sacred that whispered, "This isn't it." And she tried to ignore that voice, tried to believe that love meant staying, even when staying meant leaving herself behind. She convinced herself that silence was maturity, that shrinking was humility, that waiting was loyalty. But all the while, her spirit was sending signals that something was wrong. She felt herself dimming bit by bit, hoping that the dimness would make her more lovable, hoping that if she gave enough, softened enough, stayed enough, she'd finally feel like enough. She was so busy trying to keep someone else happy, she didn't notice she was running on empty. Her prayers changed. She stopped asking God what he wanted for her and started asking what she could do to be chosen. And somewhere in the middle of all that striving, she forgot her name, the name God gave her, the one written in strength, laced with destiny, dripping in grace. She forgot she was royalty because she started living like a servant to someone else's attention. She wore smiles that didn't reach her eyes. She excused behavior that her spirit knew was beneath her. She stayed longer than peace did. She gave more than was being returned. She mistook consistency for love. She mistook presence for purpose, and the whole time she was slipping further from the girl she used to be. The girl who danced without fear, who dreamed without limits, who prayed with fire. It's not that she didn't know better. It's that she knew and hoped it would change. She thought maybe love was supposed to hurt a little. Maybe relationships always take sacrifice. Maybe if she loved harder, prayed deeper, waited longer, things would get better. But all that time, she was bending and twisting and contorting to be small enough for someone who didn't have the capacity to handle her fullness. And God was watching, not with judgment, but with grief, because he saw her settling for less than he designed. He saw her giving away her voice, her vision, her value. He saw her forgetting that she was never meant to beg for what should have been freely given. He saw her treating herself like a project someone else had to complete when he already called her finished, complete, and whole. She used to walk with fire, now she walks on eggshells. She used to speak with power. Now she edits her truth. She used to dream wildly. Now she's just trying to survive the day, and it hurts because deep down she knows this version of her isn't real. It's a costume, a mask, a performance she keeps up hoping it will lead to peace. But there is no peace in pretending. There is no healing in hiding. There is no destiny in dimming. And even though she's still showing up, still being kind, still hoping for the best, something inside her knows that who she is now isn't who she was born to be. Her soul is restless. Her heart is aching. Her prayers have turned into whispers. She's tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix, because exhaustion doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from becoming too little of yourself for too long. The mirror doesn't lie, and lately the girl looking back at her is unfamiliar, not because she isn't beautiful, but because she knows what it took to become this version of herself, the silences she endured, the tears she never let anyone see, the dignity she handed over just to feel loved, and now she stands on the edge of a decision, maybe not consciously. Maybe she hasn't said it out loud, but something in her spirit is stirring. Calling, pulling not away from love, but back to herself, back to truth, back to the fire she once carried, the fire that made her glow without trying, the one that didn't need validation to exist. It was just there. Burning, holy, unapologetic. It's not gone. It's just buried under the weight of trying too hard to be someone she was never meant to be. There's a strange ache that settles in when you no longer feel at home in your own life. When the very space you once felt safe in begins to feel like a stranger. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's in the way you pause before speaking. Measuring every word like it might cost too much. Sometimes it's in the way you stay quiet during conversations where you once would have spoken up. It's in the way your laughter feels forced, your joy feels borrowed, your peace feels thin. It's not that anything drastic has happened, but you've been slowly, silently evicted from the emotional home you used to live in. You're still showing up, still answering texts, still taking the calls, still keeping the image together. But inside, you've already started packing, not with boxes, but with prayers, not with tape, but with tears. She's the girl who always tries to hold it all together. The one who tells herself, it's fine. This is just what love looks like. This is just the cost of being chosen. But no one talks about how much it costs to stay in a space that no longer carries your name. How much it takes to stay emotionally loyal to something that hasn't held you in return. How much of your identity you have to trade just to keep the peace. There's no lease, no contract, but your soul knows you don't belong there anymore. And even when nothing is being said, everything is being felt. You feel tension in places where there used to be trust. You feel distance in conversations that used to be soft and safe. You don't feel seen, not really. You don't feel heard, not deeply, and the most dangerous thing, you've gotten used to it. Numbness has become normal, silence has become safety, loneliness has become the standard, and you've learned how to smile through it because you're afraid of what leaving might mean. The eviction doesn't always start with a breakup or a door slammed shut. Sometimes it starts with a quiet shift in your own spirit, a still, small voice that whispers, "This is no longer you." A restlessness that makes you question why you feel so drained after every interaction. Why your energy doesn't recover the way it used to. Why your spirit feels heavy in moments that should feel light. You start realizing you're the only one unpacking the emotional baggage. You're the one always saying sorry, even when you were the one hurt. You're the one overcompensating, overthinking, overgiving, just to feel a little closeness, and still there's a coldness, still there's a distance, still there's an emptiness that no amount of effort seems to fix. You start to recognize that you're paying a price your soul can no longer afford. The rent has gone up, and what it's costing you now is your peace, your joy, your identity. It becomes a place where you feel like a guest, like a visitor in your own emotional world. You walk on eggshells, you tiptoe around truth, you downplay your needs because voicing them has never brought resolution, only tension. You know how to hide your sadness well, you know how to dress up your disappointment. You know how to keep the mask on even when your soul is breaking, and all of that pretending becomes exhausting. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind that makes your spirit ache. The kind that makes you feel like you're carrying a version of yourself that doesn't fit anymore. You try to pray, but your prayers hit the ceiling. You try to journal, but the words won't come. You try to worship, but the tears betray the lyrics, because deep down you know something is wrong. You've become a stranger to yourself. You're in a space that doesn't honor your presence, and your spirit knows it. It knows when the soil is no longer fertile. It knows when your purpose is being choked by the weeds of emotional compromise. It knows when your capacity is being drained instead of poured into, and God in His mercy starts tapping on your soul, not to punish you, but to awaken you, not to judge you, but to remind you that He never designed you to live in places that demand you leave your wholeness at the door. But you keep trying, you keep hoping that maybe if you show up differently, the space will change. Maybe if you love harder, it will finally feel like home again. Maybe if you lower your expectations just a little more, the disconnect will fade. But it doesn't, because no matter how much effort you put in, it cannot replace what's missing at the foundation. You can decorate dysfunction, you can dress it up, you can even make it Instagram worthy. But if your spirit doesn't feel safe, if your soul isn't at rest, if your voice has been silenced to keep the illusion alive, you've already been evicted. You're just still sleeping on the floor, hoping they'll notice you're missing. But the truth is, you've already left. The woman God called you to be is outside, knocking. Not to be let in, but to remind you that you were never meant to live like this. There's a version of her that used to live wide open. She used to be unfiltered, unbothered, and unapologetically full of life. Her joy wasn't calculated. Her love wasn't cautious. Her voice didn't shake. She trusted easily, loved deeply, believed freely. There was a softness about her that wasn't weak, it was holy. But somewhere between broken promises and unmet expectations, she learned how to guard herself in places where she was supposed to feel safe. She learned to perform, not on stages, but in relationships. She began playing the role of what someone else needed her to be, hoping that if she got the lines right, if she acted perfectly enough, she'd finally be enough. She smiled through confusion. She clapped for herself quietly. She made herself small enough to fit into someone else's idea of worthy, while the real her sat quietly in the background, waiting to be remembered. It didn't feel like pretending at first. It felt like love. It felt like compromise. It felt like doing what women do, making it work. But day by day, she traded authenticity for approval. She gave up her voice for the sake of peace. And peace never came, because peace built on pretense is fragile. It shatters under the weight of your truth, and she had a lot of truth. She had things to say, desires to express, dreams that wouldn't stay quiet. But every time she tried to bring her full self to the table, she could feel the shift, the subtle resistance, the quiet judgment, so she started tucking pieces of herself away, not because she wanted to, but because she thought she had to. She told herself, maybe this version of me is easier to love. The version that doesn't cry too loud, the version that doesn't need too much, the version that always says yes, even when her heart is screaming no. She didn't lose herself overnight. She lost herself slowly in moments that seemed small, in the way she stopped correcting someone when they misunderstood her, in the way she said, "It's okay," when it really wasn't, in the way she smiled and nodded while something inside her broke. She became the girl who could be everything for everyone except herself. She made it look easy. She made it look graceful, but behind closed doors she was unraveling. Not in chaos, but in silence. Because pretending to be okay takes a different kind of strength. A strength that wears you out from the inside. A strength that leaves you empty after giving everything away. A strength that's rooted in fear, fear of being too much, fear of being left, fear of being misunderstood, and so she performed. She performed confidence when she felt insecure. She performed patience when she felt overlooked. She performed joy when she felt unseen. The applause for this performance is addicting. People love the version of you that never complains, never pushes back, never disrupts the flow, but she wasn't created to be convenient. She wasn't born to live muted. She wasn't called to keep peace by sacrificing her own, and deep down she knows it. She knows there's a deeper truth beneath the performance, a voice that's getting harder to silence. A calling that's becoming louder than her fear. There's a rebellion rising in her soul, not to destroy, but to rebuild, to pull off the mask and remember what her real face looks like, the one that doesn't wait for permission. The one that doesn't dim to be digestible, the one that doesn't perform for love, but walks boldly in it. She used to think if she was low maintenance enough, soft spoken enough, easygoing enough, she'd finally be chosen. But chosen for what? A version of her that doesn't even exist anymore, a version of her that's a shell of the woman God created. She was chosen long before the performance, chosen in her fullness, chosen in her mess. Chosen with her emotions, her opinions, her dreams, her calling, and now she's being invited to return, not to what was, but to who she's always been, the girl before the edits, before the masks, before the fear. And it's hard to admit you've been living in a character. It's hard to stop mid-performance and say, this isn't me. It's hard to risk being misunderstood. It's hard to show up without the filters. But it's harder to live a life that doesn't feel like yours. It's harder to spend years being celebrated for a version of you that you don't even recognize. She's learning that peace isn't found in being easy to love. It's found in being fully known and still fully accepted. And that kind of love, real love, divine love, doesn't need you to perform. It calls you out of the performance. It calls you to stand in your truth. It calls you to reclaim your voice, your space, your story. It calls you to undo the lie that told you being loved required you to be less. There's a moment in every girl's life when she realizes that the version of love she thought she wanted is not the love she truly needs. It's not wrapped in butterflies or late-night texts. It's not in the highs and lows of toxic patterns disguised as passion. It's not in the way he says all the right things when she's just about ready to walk away. She starts to see through the charm, the way he knows how to pull her back in, not with commitment, but with convenience, not with consistency, but with control. And while the world claps for relationships that look good on the outside, her soul knows the difference between being loved and being used, between being chosen and being convenient, between being cherished and being tolerated. She's been in the space where words are sweet but actions are sour, where promises are made but never kept, where apologies come quickly but change never stays. At first, she stayed because she thought love was about endurance. About staying when it gets hard, about forgiving without boundaries, about proving she could be the one who never gave up. But over time, that mindset started costing her. It cost her peace, it cost her clarity. It cost her time, and what hurt most wasn't what he did. It was what she allowed in the name of love. She began to recognize that her heart wasn't being held with care, that she was loving deeply and receiving shallowly. that she was investing in something that gave her returns only when it felt like it, that she was auditioning for a role she was already overqualified for. She tried to convince herself that he had potential. That if she just gave him more grace, more time, more chances, he'd become the man she believed he could be. But potential is not partnership. Hoping someone grows is not the same as watching them actually do the work. And love is not supposed to be built on hoping someone finally sees your worth. Love is supposed to meet you in your worth, see it, honor it, rise to it. But instead, she found herself dimming, tolerating, enduring, surviving. She called it loyalty, but really it was fear. Fear of starting over, fear of being alone, fear of the unknown, and fear is a cruel architect. It will build a life that looks like stability but feels like a cage. She knows what it's like to scroll past happy couples and feel that quiet ache, to wonder what's wrong with her, to question if she's asking for too much, to overanalyze her own worth based on someone else's inability to rise to the occasion. But she's not hard to love. She's just been giving her love to people who aren't ready for the weight of it, people who like the idea of her but not the responsibility of her, people who want the benefit of her presence without the sacrifice of real commitment. And she's tired, not the kind of tired that rest fixes, but the kind that comes from hoping too long, waiting too long, believing in potential more than proof. But she's waking up, slowly, quietly, boldly. She's realizing that the same heart that broke can also lead her back to herself, that she doesn't have to stay in cycles just because they're familiar, that closure doesn't always come in a conversation, it sometimes comes in a decision. A decision to stop settling, a decision to stop proving, a decision to stop participating in anything that doesn't align with her peace, her purpose, her power. She's learning to hold herself, to comfort herself, to pour into herself what she kept waiting for someone else to give. She's learning that being alone is not the same as being empty, that solitude can be sacred, that singleness is not a waiting room, it's a training ground. She's not bitter, she's not broken, she's just done betraying herself to keep someone else comfortable, done pretending that a connection is enough when there's no covering, done idolizing the idea of a relationship more than honoring the reality of what it actually is. She's realizing that love should never require her to become less of herself, that real love feels like freedom, real love feels like alignment, real love invites her to grow, not shrink, to rise, not fold. To speak, not silence. She used to think being chosen was the goal. Now she knows being whole is the priority, because when she's whole, she won't settle for halfway love. She won't confuse crumbs for feasts. She won't apologize for being too much. She won't chase people who only show up when it's convenient. She will stand in her truth even if it means standing alone. She will honor her heart even when it aches. She will choose herself. Not in selfishness, but in sacredness, because she finally understands that she was never meant to hand over the pen of her story to someone who only wants to write in certain chapters. So now she stands not just as a girl with a boyfriend, but as a woman who found herself in the middle of loving someone else. A woman who learned to stop shrinking to be held, who realized her worth was never tied to who stayed or who left. She walked through confusion, silence, compromise, and performance. But she didn't lose, she learned, she rose, she remembered, and in the remembering, she reclaimed her voice, her identity, her space. This isn't about bitterness, this isn't about blaming, this is about awakening, this is about becoming, because at the end of it all, she wasn't just looking for someone to love her, she was looking for the strength to love herself again. And now that she has it, she won't let it go. She will walk in the fullness of who she is, not waiting to be chosen, but knowing she already is, already called, already worthy, already whole.